on this side.
The person transcribing this interview is going to be cussing us.
It's totally all right. Okay, this is and Gulo. Today's date is March 19th, 2021, and I'm with participant ID number HBKL169. This is part two. Okay, so who do the residents of Hillside and Belmead trust?
Excuse me?
Yeah, who do the residents of Hillside and Belmead trust?
Oh, who do they trust?
Hmm.
Well, that's a really tough question because it varies. I mean, I can give you examples right now. Just happened to yesterday where the police department was trying to get some information from a resident, and they needed to meet with them. And they called me because I had a relationship with that particular resident. I was able to call them up and say, "Hey, I need you to go to the police headquarters and meet with Richmond Police to be interviewed," and they complied and did. And so, yeah, some trust me, those that I've interacted with. Some don't as well. I would say more those that have met me more trust me than don't. But um, so there's that. I mean, trust. Who do they trust? I mean, like implicitly trust. I think that trust from the residents is something that is earned specifically. I don't think it's like, I mean, I know they probably, for the most part, don't trust the police. Hold on a second. But other than, and then, they don't trust probably the city as well. They don't trust RRHA in some regard. But those that engage and have had the opportunity to work with some police officers and some people with RHA, that trust is earned at that point. So unilaterally, I think there's a certain amount of distrust that goes along with just about anyone living in our communities. And I think it's something that, in order to overcome, that's a relational kind of thing that has to take place.
Okay. Excuse me.
Yeah, whatever I had, I just gave it to you.
Jumping through the screen. So the next set of questions asks about your opinions of the leaders in Hillside and Belmead. And by leaders, we're talking about people who may or may not live in the community and who have knowledge of community strengths and needs, have influence in the community, and who take a lead in helping to achieve community goals. So are there any leaders that are addressing youth violence in Hillside and Belmead?
Addressing violence specifically?
Addressing youth violence.
I mean, one of the biggest, I would say, influence in that community right now is the Office of Community Wealth Building, educational connectors, and the leadership on that. They're there a lot. They interact with the community and the residents a lot, and they come from the community, so therefore they have a certain amount of trust built in there. So I would say that's one group that is well respected and trusted, um, that has an influence not only on juvenile crime but crime and education together, and other things. Their tentacles are broad and touch on a lot of different things. Who else is influential? Um, I think the council, the resident tenant council has some influence as well, and is, I think, for the most part, trusted. But there's distrust there as well. I mean, because of their connectivity to us, and um, you know, um, I don't know that there's anybody that like is floating around that community that everybody trusts. You know,
Okay.
I think that Again, something burned, but go ahead.
Have any new community leaders emerged since the start of the pandemic?
Community leaders emerged?
Yeah.
No, I'm not aware of any that have emerged. I mean, there's a tenant council over there with the president, and vice president. They're the, by de facto, the leaders of that particular community. And, but I'm not aware of any others that have emerged since the pandemic, except the Office of Community Wealth Building, because that emerged since the pandemic.
Okay. So how do leaders or service providers build trust with the residents of Hillside and Belmead?
Well, you got to be there. I mean, you can't just show up. I mean, they're tired of getting, poked and prodded. And what I mean by that is, studied, surveyed, and I'm not pointing fingers at VCU or anybody in particular, but I mean, but those certain studies, of course, that need to happen, and they give us some insight sometimes as to what's going on. But a lot of times, I think I told you the story about sitting with the chief and having a big intelligence briefing when I told him, I said I could have asked the precinct sector cop for that particular area, and he could have told me the same thing. I mean, the idea is, and that's what's unique about these educational connectors from the Office of Community Wealth Building. They're in the community. They're knocking on doors every day. Hey, Joey, you need to get up and make sure you're plugged into your computer and going to school. And you do that enough times and you develop that, that kind of a relationship, that trust relationship. And, for me, even though like I usually come out on weekends and walk the neighborhoods and engage, I have a list of people that I go by and visit with. And, I develop that certain trust factor by knocking on the door and sitting down and talking with them. And, sometimes there's a reason I'm there. Sometimes, well, quite frankly, every time there's a reason I'm there. But, sometimes it's a good reason. Sometimes it's a bad reason. But whatever that reason is, just, even if it's bad, sometimes, quite honestly, I met with a kid yesterday and had to get him barred from the property. And at the end of the conversation, I say, hey, look, man, there's no hard feelings here. I'm trying to protect the community. He understands that. He had done some things that were affecting the safety of the community in general, and he needed to go. And so I think, quite frankly, if I ran into that kid on the street, I think there's a certain, he acknowledged me. We'd be able to have a conversation. There's a certain amount of trust there because I never lied to him. I was forthright with him, and that's what they want. They want to just be told the truth. I always tell them I'm never going to promise you anything I can't do. And if I make the promise, I'm going to do it. I might tell you I'm going to try to do something. That's not a promise. That's a promise I'm going to try to do it. Someone might want to transfer, and I'll say I'll see what I can do, but I'm not going to promise you I'll be able to do it. It's when you start making promises that you can't keep, and then they're like, hey, this guy can't do it. So, I think it's partly about being there, and the other part is about just being honest with what you can and what you can't do. And what I'm honest with them when they're not meeting my expectations. I'd let them know that. They know that. They don't. Everybody knows the difference between right and wrong. There's no magical formula to understand that. Everybody understands it. They know it, and they don't mind at times being called out for it, as long as you treat them with respect and they understand what the consequences are before it happens, and then they accept those consequences.
Mm-hmm. So has trust between the residents and community leaders changed in the past year?
Yeah, I think so, because I'm actually deriving that. I'm not saying that with much authority, but anecdotally, the RTO, the Resident Tenant Organization, we haven't met with them in person 3 or 4 months. Tenant councils, they're not meeting at all, as far as I understand. I haven't met in a public forum with the residents myself in a while, because there are no public forums to be able to do that with, right? I mean, we've done virtual meetings, but at least from my perspective. I'm more of a, I'm not, you're not getting the full effect right now because I'm better in person. I mean, I feel like at least. So, I think that's been a challenge in so many ways that we probably won't understand for years to come.
So then would you say that it's gotten better or worse?
Oh, it's gotten worse. Yeah, I don't have to hesitate. I mean, and it will get better when we start meeting back in person, when we start having programs that we can have with our families and youth and adults, and we can develop those relationships and that trust. Yeah, it will get better. It will get. This is. I mean, to say it's been challenging is an understatement.
So what type of information is available in Hillside and Belmead about youth violence prevention? And this can be like outreach from providers, brochures, posters, online information.
Yeah, so we're doing a thing tonight, actually, from 4 to 6, called Can We Talk? It's being put on by the Inspire Group. What I've done with the steering committee that I run is I've tried to, leverage that with other organizations. And one of the things I'm trying to do, we have a director of communications here. So when I discover things that other people are doing, I make sure that I promote that through our social media and other things. And so this is one of those things. And I'm going to try to dial into it tonight and listen, just to hear. I'm not going to speak, but I want to hear if there are some youth that dial in, I want to hear what they have to say. So yeah, there's opportunities, and when we have those opportunities, and mostly everything now is virtual. So, and social media is prolific, of course, and in both a good and a bad way.
Okay. So have you heard of any new programs for youth and families in the Hillside Belmead communities in the past year?
No, I haven't. And in my philosophy, I don't really subscribe to new programs. And the reason is because there's too many programs already. We just need to figure out which ones are good, support those, and hold them accountable to do what they say they're going to do. I mean, I went on, I don't think I was with you. I think I was with someone else, and I said, there's a website called Help One RVA. Are you familiar with it?
Yep, you told me about it.
So you can go on there, and there's like 290 healthcare referral. I mean, do we need 300? I don't think so. And I mean, so we need to just do a good job at what we got. Now, there might be. No, I'm not saying that someone across the country isn't doing something wonderful that we might be able to adopt or kind of go into, but that takes time, money, effort, leadership, collaboration, cooperation from multiple different sources. I like the platform. I like exploring the platform that we currently have, and not necessarily using the entire platform, but evaluating what we have, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and then supporting that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 programs, as opposed to, trying to rebuild and then brand it under something that you think you maybe created. There's very little left in the world to create in that space that hasn't already been done at some point in time.
Okay. So what have you heard about the Hillside Community Garden?
I don't know much about it. I think I'm not sure. That was probably part of the, oh God. I think that was part of the public safety grant from the Attorney General's office. Is that the one you're referring to?
I'm actually not sure. That's just the question says,
Yeah, I'm not sure
for the Hillside Community Garden. I think
because
it's
there's
the
a
one
community.
behind the rental office.
Yeah,
No? Okay. So what have you heard about the activities and resources available at Belmead Park?
I don't know much about Belmead Park because that's outside of my thing, if you will.
Okay. So how do residents of Hillside and Belmead find out about positive activities for their kids?
Hold on just a second. I have to write myself this note or I'll forget. That was a phone call. It just reminded me I had to do something. I'll put that right on my screen and okay, let's go. What was the question?
Yes. So how do residents of Hillside and Belmead find out about positive activities for their kids?
That's mostly done through the property management right there on site. There's a resident services coordinator, there's a property manager, and then here in our headquarters building, if you will, it's not called headquarters, but my law enforcement stuff coming through. There's a director of communications. And so those three entities kind of work together when things are available and promote those through social media, signage, and other things.
Okay. So you kind of mentioned this a bit before, but how does your organization communicate with residents of Hillside and Belmead?
How do we communicate?
Yeah.
Oh, well, a number of different platforms. I mean, first of all, what I just said, social media. We have a director of communications who's, really good at the social media stuff. It's not my expertise, but I know she does a good job of that. I see some of it on social media myself. But we also have the platform of the resident tenant organization, which is all the presidents of each of our big six and others come together on a regular basis and meet. And then during that meeting, I usually am there and I present public safety issues. Then there's the tenant council meetings, which are on site for each place. Again, I sometimes come and present and speak. And then there's a sundry of other type of different meetings that go on and take place that, they utilize our facilities to facilitate and so forth. And, sometimes we get invited and we have, communication with them at that time.
Okay. So
we also use the schools as well, of course.
Okay.
They use us. If they have something going on, they'll call us, let us know. We can promote it, and vice versa.
Okay. So I think you may have mentioned this in your previous responses from last time, but just in case you have anything to add. In the past year, have community residents engaged with you or your organization to discuss and resolve issues that affect youth violence?
I mean, we've discussed that in a general context, but not specifically, I don't believe. I mean, we've, we have every once in a while we have this big, we had a big, a Zoom meeting with all the residents and they could, email in questions and then the communications director send those around and we answered them, and then she would respond out with it. But I don't recall. I mean, the thing that I get back regarding juveniles from mothers and from the juveniles themselves is I need jobs, activities, sports, something for my kids to do.
Okay.
That's what they need. And, it's probably a good opportunity for some social workers from VCU to get involved and do something like that, some kind of volunteer work.
Okay. So how often does this happen for community residents engaging you or your organization about
several times a month.
Okay.
When we're fully functional, when there's no COVID. Because I think the council meets once a month. RTO meets once a month, and then tenant councils, I think they meet. It's up to the individual tenant councils, but about once a month they meet. So there's opportunities multiple times during that just for me, but the property managers, they meet with the tenants every day. They always come to the office and engage in some kind of dialogue.
Okay. So what, if anything, might serve as a barrier to residents engaging you or your organization?
Cell phone at all, internet access, my inability to get out every day and engage. I mean, I do that, try to do it once or twice a week if I can, but it's hard sitting in this position and then also trying to manage like executive level type stuff and then also trying to do the other stuff as well. So it's a tough balance, but that's just for me. But like I said, like the property managers, they engage every day and they're available every day. The office is open, they can go, but it's more structured for others. It's either an RTO meeting, a tenant council meeting, or we're having a meeting about, the transition of Creighton Court over to their new location, or that kind of stuff. So we engage the communities specifically about what things are impacting them individually. Like for example, Creighton Court, or something's going on at Gilpin specifically. We'll have a all hands type meeting for that as well. So there's ample opportunity for that engagement.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. So you may have already mentioned this a bit, but have you or your organization been involved in community conversations to discuss and resolve issues related to youth violence?
Again, not specifically to youth violence. I mean, that's come up, but we've had town hall meetings and things like that on a fairly regular basis, in which it's given them the opportunity. And of course, I carry around this everywhere I go. I've given out probably over 1,000 of them, and it has my personal cell phone number on it.
Okay.
So hardly a day goes by I'm not talking to some resident about something, and it could be something not important. I had one just call me a few minutes ago, asked me something maintenance issue. I gave them the right number, but the point is that they have access, at least to me, and to, again, property managers are really in the game.
Okay. So are there any aspects of positive youth development that you feel your organization is working to address?
Yeah, I do. A lot of things we're doing. Do you want me to go over them all? I go over
you don't have to do all of them, but if you can elaborate a little bit.
We're starting we've got a relationship that we are under development, if you will, with Virginia Union University to engage. Now, this is specific for Gilpin. Do you want me to talk about it?
Yeah, sure. It's not specific. This question isn't in particular specific.
It's going to be a relationship between Virginia Union, Richmond City, and RHA, and we're going to be addressing not only youth, but mostly youth issues. And the idea, they're committing for 20 years. The idea is they're going to be create mentorships, pathways through primary and secondary education into potentially college education at Virginia Union University. We've got the educational connectors that we have partnered with, that we're working with to address truancy and access to materials related to remote learning. And we're trying to expand that or lengthen that into next year when, that's hopefully COVID's done and we're back to school, but we're still going to have that platform to work with our kids that are truant. And that's a significant issue. It's a really big issue with Richmond Public Schools and our residents. You know, we're looking to create some victim witness housing, address victim witness housing, emergency and long-term housing for um, our our residents in general, but that includes obviously the youth that are involved, and there's hardly a household here that doesn't have youth involved. We've got a mental health subcommittee working on the steering committee, or soon will be. I'm going to assign it this month, working on mental health issues. Um, what other things are we working on? I mean, I can't even think of them all. But I mean, there's some things that are in the process, but we're also through the referral program, we are constantly mining for existing programs that we're trying to leverage. One is the Juvenile Justice Center in the city has a program for children that have entered into the court systems, and we've met with them and asked them if they would extend their program to children that have not entered into the justice system, that are identified by us as headed in that direction, if you will, or vulnerable to that, so that we can get them redirected before they get to the justice system. So we're that's in its infancy stages, but we have made one referral so far, and we're going to continue to make more as it goes across. I am engaging the juvenile probation and parole to try to explore the possibility of partnering with them and Richmond Police Department, and also adult probation and parole, to start doing home visits to follow up and ensure that the youth that are on probation are complying with their probation, and make sure that they understand that we're watching, and to encourage them and offer them whatever services we may identify, or they may identify to us, that can help them be successful in their endeavor to get off probation.
Okay. So what recommendations do you have to prevent youth violence in Hillside and Belmead?
Say that again.
Yeah. What recommendations do you have to help prevent youth violence in Hillside and Belmead?
Well, see, you want to be able to eat breakfast on Saturday, don't you?
Preferably.
Okay. Look, there's so many things that we're not doing, or that we're doing that we can do better. But so we talked a little bit about jobs, education, mentoring, prevention, intervention type activities and influences. Those things, quite frankly, I feel like we're at least in the game and moving towards solutions in those areas. Okay. We're not where we need to be, but we at least have identified those things as a priority. I've got the right people sitting around the table to make some changes and to move towards being successful in those arenas. Where we're lacking, here I go insulting people, is I think I mentioned this before, we need a collaborative, structured enforcement strategy to address that side of it. And, with the social unrest, the implied, oh gosh, how am I going to say this? Law enforcement is having a difficult time right now. There's the men and women in law enforcement are working their butts off. But in my opinion, there still lacks a overall collaborative strategy among all enforcement agencies, not just I'm talking about federal, state, and local, that is unified and focused and targeted. And so I think that's, if I had to pick one thing right now, that's what I would ask for.
Okay. So the next question is actually, if money were no object, what would be your first line of action to reduce youth violence in Hillside and Belmead?
Oh, that's an easy one. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Unlimited funds.
Unlimited funds?
I'd tear down all the big six and build new housing, mixed use housing, not just in the city of Richmond. I would give our residents the opportunity to choose whether they want to stay in the city of Richmond or whether they want to go to Henrico or Chesterfield or Hanover. And I would employ, that's not the right word, I would ask our neighboring leaders to overcome their NIMBYism to that type of effort. And if there was somebody, not in my position, but there was somebody sitting in this office 30 years ago. This building's been here a long time. And the 30 years ago, they were sitting in my office and they were looking out the window and they were looking at Gilpin Court. That view hadn't changed in over 50 years. And that's criminal.
Mm-hmm.
So we need that. If I had all the money, no budget to worry about, I would start building better low-income housing, mixed use for our residents, and get them out of here.
Okay. The next set of questions are specifically around the COVID-19 pandemic. So think back to March 2020 when we first heard about it and things began to shut down in Richmond. So how has the pandemic impacted your organization?
Oh, well, right now there's 5 people in this building, I think. And this building probably holds 60 or more. I don't know, somewhere like that. I mean, look, nobody's at work. I mean, they're all working. They're working from home. So, we're sitting on these calls. And, I'd love to be sitting in an office or conference room downstairs talking to you about this, but, that's not going to happen. Yeah, it's made our job much more difficult. I used to get regular intelligence briefings from the police department. We can't do those anymore. I'm probably overly cautious when I'm out in the neighborhood talking to residents. I'm hesitant to go in their apartments with them. I do, but I try to stay distanced from them. And I've had young ladies bawling in front of me, and I can't put my arm around them to console them because they just lost a loved one or whatever awful thing has happened to them. Yeah, it's a hard environment to work under, and I hope I never get used to it.
The next question is, how has the pandemic impacted your role in your organization?
Well, I think I just said that, didn't I? And then I just kind of answer that. I mean, I just can't do the job the way I want to. It's taking that personal touch of, anybody can do a job, right? You just go through the motions. But I'm not one of the. I'm not one of that goes through the motions. I unfortunately get emotionally attached or whatever. I'm kind of overly passionate, some people may say, but yeah, it's much more difficult job to do without that personal contact. And you can influence. I'm not going to influence you sitting here on this Zoom call, or if you were one of my residents and I was trying to console you or whatever it was. I'm not effective at this in this media. So, and I don't think anybody is. I don't think it's not particular to me. It's the way it is. And so, I think it's impacted at least my ability to do my job as well as I would like to be able to do it.
So how has the pandemic impacted the programs and services that your organization provides to Hillside and Valmead? So like what if any changes have been made, and what if anything has remained constant?
Well, we're not doing it. We're not having meetings. The residents aren't coming to meet. We have a Parks and Recreation embedded in some of our communities. They're shut everything down. They're not doing anything. We're not having any basketball camps. We're not having any football camps. We're not having this. We're not having that. I mean, it's had a significant impact. And what was really bad before is absolutely almost unbearable now. I mean, a couple days ago, last week, I think it was like 78 degrees here. It was like a daggone Mardi Gras out here in Gilpin Court. I mean, the residents were like busting out of the place. I mean, it was just, and I don't blame them, but I mean, it was just, it's going to get it's not going to be pretty. I feel like this summer when everybody gets their vaccine, things loosen up, or kind of transitioning towards normality, if you will. And I think there's going to be a unleashing of energy,
Mm-hmm.
and contain it for a good way. But I'm just saying it's going to be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to the challenge, though. I'd rather do it that way than the way we're doing it now.
Okay. So actually, the next question is, how has the pandemic impacted families in Hillside and Valmead?
Well, and again, all my answers, I know you're saying Hillside or Valmead, but I'm putting it all together here. I think there's a certain amount of mental health issues that are exacerbated by this this environment we find ourselves in. I think the children are exceptionally challenged in school, in their interaction, social development, athletic development, educational, the whole thing. I think it covers everything. I mean, I can't even. You say have you been in our properties?
Mm-hmm.
So how would you like to be stuck in there for a year? A year. I mean, I walk into those things. Sometimes I can't see anybody because the lights are out and there's no windows, or there's just like one window, and it's really dark and dank, and just. I mean, it's like you live here. I walk into. I bet you 50% of the ones that I walk into, the fire, what am I trying? The detector, the fire smoke detector is beeping. And I'm like, what? Do you all hear that? And they're like, oh no, we're just used to that. I mean, we'll change the battery for you. Just call it in. But they're almost like deadened to it, and that's kind of the way. It's not just that. That's more of an analogy of the way they are. They're depressed and accepting of what for most of us should be unacceptable. Mm-hmm. And we as leaders, we're just not getting it done. The city's not getting. I'll say this: you can quote me on this one. The city's not getting it done either. The city's not providing appropriate funds, supporting us through licensing and other things to get. I mean, everybody's at fault. I mean, this is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And the only reason, one of the biggest reasons it hadn't changed is because the people that we're doing it to don't have any real voice.
Mm-hmm.
can tell you right now, wouldn't happen in my neighborhood.
So has the pandemic impacted violence in Hillside and Belmead?
Yeah, I think it has. I'm not exactly sure how. It's, violence, which I monitor very closely, of course. It's hard. It's hard to look at violence, and even if you have the insight of what the circumstances are around it and those things, it's hard sometimes to discern what the underlying cause of that is, because there's so much that go in to uh, the final act of actually pulling that trigger and somebody gets shot or wounded. And so that's it's, you can, well, it's drug related or it's, gang related. Most time it's just argument related. I don't like you for whatever reason. You live in Gilpin and I live in Mosby or whatever that. So I think it has. I think if you look at the country itself, I think violent crime went up last year. We were pretty level here, and I don't say that to beat my chest at all, because there's no one single thing that actually impact. No one can take credit. Hey, I stopped violent. Nobody can do that. It's an sundry of different activities. It's a collaboration of leadership and resources. And when I ran ATF, I used to tell my guys, to get out in the neighborhood and talk to people. And I always said, you never know when that one little conversation, somebody was getting ready to go kill somebody, and because they talked to you and you scared them off, someone did get killed. You'll never know, but I guarantee it has happened. And so, we all just need to do our job and do it well, and make sure that we are leveraging one another's resources so we can spread our. I keep saying the same thing over and over. It's not a rocket science concept. It's pretty simple, but so for something so simple, it's very difficult to accomplish.
So would you say that the pandemic has impacted youth violence specifically?
Oh yeah, I think it's impacted all violence, and youth violence is somewhat I would consider to be prolific right now. It's a different environment than it was when I was, in my earlier part of my career. And the youth today are either shooting at somebody or shooting themselves, and there's a lot of that, believe it or not. We just had one last week with playing with a gun, they shot themselves. Guns are dangerous. I mean, it just takes a little pull of the trigger and it goes bang, and no one knows where that little bullet's coming down. And you can just a few years ago, a little boy was killed on July 4th because someone shot a gun up in the air, just up straight in the air, and it came back down and hit a kid in the head and killed him. Because if you shoot something up in the air, it's got to come down, and if it comes down on somebody, it's going to kill them. Or if you shoot one at an angle and it just kind of lofts over, it's going somewhere. It's going to end. So anyway, guns are, anybody that thinks we don't need gun control is crazy. But anyway, okay. I won't go into that conversation. That's
So while the issue is not new, there's been recent national attention on issues of racial justice stemming from the exacerbation of inequities by the pandemic, the wrongful deaths of Black people at the hands of law enforcement, and the accompanying protests here in Richmond and across the country. So I know we've mentioned this in previous responses, but how have these events impacted your organization?
my organization. It's impacted my organization because when that social unrest was taking place, and you saw all the law enforcement presence around the monuments and so on and so forth, uh, where do you think those police officers came from? They came from my neighborhood. It left me naked here. And it wasn't the police department's fault. They did the best they could. They had to go with the skeleton crew here to support their presence there. And it essentially effectively did exactly what it wasn't meant to do. It punished the very people they were trying to allegedly help. I can tell you there weren't many, if any, of my residents there. I didn't talk to any that were there. There were a few walks through my neighborhood, and the residents were like, "What are these people doing here?" And I remember saying, "Oh, they're marching through for this or that," and they're like, literally, they went like that, and like because they could care less. It wasn't impacting them. They weren't doing anything to help them. As far as the accusation of well, you didn't ask that question. I want to go there. We'll go on. Maybe you'll ask it later, and I'll answer it.
So, how have these events impacted Hillside and Belmead?
Well, quite honestly, Hillside, that side over there is pretty well sheltered from it. It's kind of off the beaten path over there. The more impactful was like the Gilpin, Fairfield, Hillside. I mean, Fairfield, Creighton. Not even Creighton. That's a little bit far out, but like Fairfield, Wickham. I saw some people out at Wickham marching or walking or whatever. And I get out and talk to them, and they weren't doing any harm. Certainly not. It'd be a bad day for them if they tried to do any harm. I wouldn't have to do anything. They'd be taken care of. Those things were, other than the impact on the resources available for the residents themselves, there was very little impact to them. They were not, for the most part, from what I understand and what I saw, they were not involved, nor did they support what was going on. I met with residents about it a couple of times, and their thing was we need police officers back in our community. That's what they wanted. They wanted police officers back in their community. And it was, the police department is just like any other agency. They have limited resources that they have to deal with, and they did a very good job, I think, of balancing that. But regardless, it still had an impact on the police department's ability to police neighborhoods I'm responsible for, including Hillside.
Okay. So has your organization made any changes either internally or in regard to service delivery to address racial justice?
I don't think so. 90% of the people we serve are African American or Black, right? I mean, the other, and I don't even know if it's 5%. There's probably like 4% are Hispanic and 1% are white. I don't know what it is, but I'm probably exaggerating one way or the other. I'm off, I'm sure, but it's something like that. So we're here to serve the underserved and underprivileged and people that need. We're here as the last resort. So, I don't know. Can't think of anything we did differently with the people we're trying to help. I mean, we just continue to do what we do, right? And I can't. No, I can't think of anything that we did. And I don't think there was anything necessary for us to do.
So what are the biggest concerns in Hillside and Belmead in terms of racial justice and youth violence?
Say that again.
Yes. What are the biggest concerns in Hillside and Belmead in terms of racial justice and youth violence?
From well, I think, and I I I think the populace, the in general, has the impact is really emboldened some to take advantage of the current uh, environment that law enforcement finds themselves in, to be uh, less respectful, more emboldened by the by using race as a way to say um, claim harassment or whatever opportunity they get. I was just out on a call. I was on a call last week, and one of my maintenance guys called me and said, "Hey, there's a fight out here, and there's a bunch of people gathering around." And oftentimes the fights in our neighborhoods kind of sometimes turn into like a melee where it just attracts everybody comes out. And so I went out there, and the fight was over, but the people were still there. And I tried to disperse the crowd. And most people listened, but there were some that were like, "Hey, you know, you can't make me leave, or you can't do this, you can't do that. What are you doing? Who are you?" The point is that I think it's emboldened some people to be more resistant, and to almost taunt. And law enforcement is being less aggressive is the wrong word, but they're not they're more reluctant to take control of situations. I feel like in a lot of respect, they're withholding where in situations, in my opinion, where they have every right to take control of the situation, but they choose not to now more often.
Okay.
I think it's affected that relationship, if you will.
Okay. So if you could change,
just because of that, it's not just because of our community. It's also because the other side too, whether or not law enforcement feels supported by their own agencies and the community in general.
okay. So if you could change 3 things in Hillside and Belmead to address racial justice, what would they be?
You're asking the wrong guy this question. Because when you say racial justice, I mean, the racial injustices that occurred, in my opinion, the greatest racial injustice that occurred, especially locally here in Richmond, it started with the building of Gilpin Court and cutting Jackson Ward in half with an interstate, and then sequestering all these people in this one little confined area of poverty. That's social injustice right there. That's awful. That's something that we haven't still rectified or paid for. I mean, and we're decades and decades into this. Everybody talks about it, but no one ever buffs up the money to make it happen. And it'd be expensive, but it's not as expensive as some of the things we have been doing to socially to justify what we've done. I mean, let's get down to the real thing. This is the real thing. The real thing is what I'm looking at out here. Just that environment. If you remove, it gave these people some dignity of a place that they could be proud to live in, or at least could function in a livable situation. When I was out on that melee that you just referred to, one of the guys I talked to was drinking a Gatorade bottle, and he finished it. He turned around and walked away from me. He took the Gatorade and he threw it straight up in the air, and it fell behind him. And I said, and I yelled at him. I said, "Hey!" And I made him come back to me. And I said, "You're going to pick that up?" Because there's trash all over the place. I said, "Did you throw it down?" Because I'll make you pick up the rest of it too. If that's what, the point is that he had no respect for where he lived. There's, everybody else throws trash around, just throw the trash around. I see that all the time. Have you ever been here on a Sunday?
No, actually.
Drive through Gilpin Court on a Sunday. Because we pick up the trash every weekday at 6:30 in the morning. We have people out there picking up the trash off the ground that's already been thrown on the ground. So come on a Sunday when we haven't picked it up for 2 days and take a look around. It's everywhere. So, I think when you asked me the question of what could we do it wasn't what could we do to address.
If you could change 3 things in the community to address racial justice, what would they be?
This is the deal. I do not believe, and you may disagree with me on this, and I've said this in a public forum before, and I was not received very well. I do not believe that law enforcement is, what's the right word? Institutionally racist. I don't think that law enforcement is institutionally racist. I think that racism exists in law enforcement at a rate no higher than what it exists in the public and in any place. It exists everywhere. And I witnessed racism in law enforcement. I addressed it when I saw it, but I know it exists, and I saw it, and I've witnessed it. So I know that. But it's not institutionalized. All of law enforcement is not racist. 99% of the men and women that work in law enforcement are caring. They're passionate about their work. They want to protect people. They want to do everything they can to ensure the safety and well-being of anybody that they come into contact with, regardless of what color they are. But yeah, we make mistakes. And there's no doubt about that. So I think what the question is asking is, what is the biggest sins regarding racism? The biggest ones are happened a long time ago. We just happen to be continuing to do nothing about them. And so if I think the biggest blight of racism is the buildings themselves and where these people live. And it would go such a long way to building their self-esteem, their motivation, their ability to live and thrive and feel good about themselves if they lived in a nicer place and they could take a certain amount of responsibility for where they lived. But we pay for people to pick up the trash after them because we haven't given them that, and they don't care. I don't mean to say they as in generalizing. Some do, of course, but if you see the trash out there, there's a whole lot that don't. So that's I go back to my previous answer. That's 1, 2, and 3 because it ain't gonna happen because there's so much money involved. I shouldn't say it ain't gonna happen. I hope it does happen, but I don't know what else there is. I mean, of course, erase racism from everybody. I work in a community where I'm actually the minority. I'm the minority for our residents, but I'm also the minority employee as well. Uh, I think there's only 2 white dudes that work here that I know of. And so, you know,
Okay.
I that's what I would do. I would address the housing situation itself.
Okay. You did mention this a little bit previously, but in case you wanted to add anything, would you say that residents of Hillside and Belmead are involved in the racial justice movement?
No.
How about the youth in Hillside and Belmead? Okay. Would you say that leaders and providers are involved or addressing change related to racial justice?
There's a few that they're involved in some discussions that I know of. I've been in discussions with them in some of the things they've been involved in. But I don't know that there's a resolution coming from any of those discussions. You know, people are really far apart on this issue. I know you know, of course, but it's
I'm so sorry. Could you repeat that? You're a bit quiet.
Oh, I said people are far apart on this issue. I mean, there's not much middle ground available to rest on, and you know, I don't know where I am, but I'm definitely not in the center. I don't think.
Okay. So finally, in addition to everything else that's been going on, it was an election year. So how does the election impact your organization? And that can be the local, state, or national elections.
Well, I can give you a real life example that I've been in conversations with just as of today, actually. So, you know, there's the idea that the Biden administration is going to become a little less restrictive on funding and other issues surrounding housing and public safety. And an example of that is I was on a panel for a grant for public safety, Project Safe Neighborhoods grant from the Department of Justice. And the grant it wasn't much, it was $75,000, but it was going to be used for license plate readers put in my neighborhoods. And the panel, we decided to give that money to Richmond Police Department to deploy. But at the time, it was during the Trump administration, and they required anyone that received funds from Project Safe Neighborhoods to sign off that they are not a sanctuary city. And that was not in alignment with the current political leadership in Richmond, and that signature was not going to happen. So the money had to come. We had to take the money back because they wouldn't take it because they wouldn't sign a document. So it came back, and then it came. Then I said, okay, well, just give it to me. I'll sign the document. I don't have any qualms about that because I'm not a sanctuary city. So and then the administration changed before we got finished it, and now the money is now back to the police department because there's an anticipation that requirement is going to change. It hasn't changed yet, but there's an anticipation that it will. So just little things like that, you know, just I think that almost like what you're seeing at the border now, there's anticipation that certain things are going to become easier. I'm not convinced that they necessarily will, but you know, there is that assumption made sometimes. So we'll have to wait and see. I kind of feel like this administration is going to be a little more favorable to public housing and other things. and I'm hoping that that's true. Um, I don't know if they'll get to the level where I think it needs to be. I'm quite frankly fairly convinced that it won't be, but hopefully it'll become a little bit better for us.
Okay. And how about the state and local elections? Have those impacted your organization at all?
Not really that I'm aware of. I think that it's been pretty static as far as like um, party. In Richmond, it's pretty much a Democratic platform, and quite frankly, the state, it's at this point, it's pretty much a static Democratic platform. Um,
Okay.
I'm apolitical, to be honest with you. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, and I served as deputy secretary for a Republican, but he never asked me, so I never told him.
Okay. So does the election impact the services your organization provides to Hillside and Bellmead?
Yeah, I think it could. I mean, it's too early into the administration to really get a good grasp on that, but I think it could. Yes,
Okay.
I think
I'm sorry?
I think the funding has a potential to increase.
Okay. And would that be from the national election or from the state or local?
National.
Okay. Would the state and local election impact the services your organization provides?
Oh, yeah, it could. I mean, but like I say, that's mostly going to be stagnant. But you know, we're funded by HUD, which is a federal agency. So we are supposed to be part of the budget by the city as well. And of course, if a different person got in there, we might get more or less. But I don't think for the most part it's going to be a significant change.
Okay. So how does the election impact the Hillside Bellmead community?
Uh, I'm not aware of any impact.
Mm. Not from either the national, state, or local election?
Not yet. There's nothing yet that is significantly. I mean, we got money for COVID and stuff like that, but that was started with under Trump and it continues under Biden. So I don't know that the election had much to do with that.
Okay. So is there anything else you would like to tell me about about you and your organization and current events? Like anything related to the pandemic or the racial justice movement or the election?
No.
No. Okay. Is there anything else you think we should know about your organization that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
I think we pretty much covered everything.
Okay. Well, that is the end of my protocol. Let me just stop the recording.